There are millions of acres of opportunity out there. They belong to you. Every day, decisions are being made that affect your land, your water, your wildlife. You should know about them. This is your mountain. Hey everybody, welcome once again to another episode of the Your Mountain podcast. It's fun to say that. It's
amazing that it's still, like, honestly,
we're still doing it.
Yeah, and I'm not sure whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. I know if I ask my wife, it's probably a bad thing.
I know. I think she's supportive. You think so? I think she's supportive.
Because you've talked to her and you haven't told me about
it? I wouldn't tell you if I did. But I'm excited. It's fun to do these with you, Nephi.
It is fun.
You know who else it's fun to do these with? Mike McGrady. Mike.
Sorry, Mike.
Where are you again? You know, he just keeps missing, and we keep missing him.
Well, if he may be, Mike may be as cheap as you, just he doesn't, let people know it. He might be cheaper, because if he really were committed, he would have just spent like $40 in gasoline and just drove down here for no other good reason than to be here.
He would have been here.
Yeah.
But we miss him. And we chug on without him, right? I'm kind of tired. This one's gonna be good because Mike's not here to make us not say stupid stuff.
Yeah. So we are recording from.
Yeah, we're recording from the wildlife. So we've just called it the North American Conference, North American Wildlife Management Conference. We're in Denver, Colorado. And we're on about day 3 or 4 of this conference, kind of seeing the finish line of it. It's been really good, really good. A lot of good sessions, a lot of great people, a lot of good ideas exchanged. Just joined Nephi.
A great speaker at lunch.
Nephi gave a nice little presentation at lunch. It was about 5 minutes. It's probably about 4 minutes too long.
Yes, it was a 3-minute talk, and it was about 4 minutes too long.
And Nephi brought in somebody to join for that lunch.
No, one of my good friends who lives here in Denver, who somehow I talked him to driving down from the mountains, where he lives up in the mountains. It's just like a mountain man. Just lives up there in the woods. It's like, hey, how about you come down to Denver and I'll get you a salad for lunch, which is what we served everybody at lunch, and then you can jump on the podcast. It seemed like a really terrible deal to me, but he's here anyway.
Denver.
Commander D.
Yep.
Thank you for joining us, sir.
Thanks for having me.
We've been wanting to do this with you for a while.
I know, yeah. We've been trying to piece it together, amongst other things. So I've fallen short on invites too many times. This was a no-brainer I had to say yes to.
Yeah, we were going to if you couldn't say yes to this, the hunting invites were going to start drying up.
Yeah, no. Trust me. There's nothing more cringe-worthy than saying no to hunting offers that are going to produce good times and good results.
Well, those offers will continue to come now.
I appreciate it.
And hopefully we can get something on the calendar before too long.
Well, thanks for coming down from the mountain. I appreciate it a ton.
Oh, I'm glad to do it.
So, so a little history. We met basically doing a podcast.
Yeah.
I don't know how 4 or 5 years ago.
That sounds right.
Yeah.
We all did that, right?
Yep. Steve Ranella did a podcast with Governor Meade. And we were going to pick Steve up at the airport, and I don't know if I told you this or not, but he's like, we're going to go to lunch. Well, yeah, we'll take you to lunch. He's like, I've got this friend who lives here, and I want to bring him. And I was like, yeah, sure, whatever. And he's like, who is it? And he's like, it's Rorke Denver. And I said, like Navy Seal Rorke Denver, like author Navy Seal Rorke Denver, like on the movie Rorke Denver. He's like, yeah. And I was like, yeah, bring him to lunch, man. See if he wants to come do the podcast. Yeah. So he called you up, and you came down, and after that, I just, lucky enough to have you here and get to go hunting a bunch and have you in the state a bunch, and it's been a blast.
It's nothing but good since. Yeah, I feel like that podcast kicked off a cascade of good opportunities. I mean, getting to know Governor Meade was obviously a treat, and that led to a friendship and also a bunch of good hunts, bunch of good times together. And it seems like the tendrils of that that podcast has stretched out to do all kinds of fun things. So I feel lucky that Steve made the call, you opened the door, and the rest is history.
Well, he's a really good dude, and likewise you are. And so for people that don't know your background,
yep.
You were a college lacrosse player, and that's like the highlight of your life, right?
that is a chapter. That is a chapter, many of which still yet to be written. Yeah, no, I grew up in the Bay Area, California. Before it got too crazy, this was Silicon Valley before you knew they were building computers down the street and stealth fighters and all the tech boom was going to explode. It was a very normal, certainly middle to middle upper class type place to grow up. But apricot orchards and just normal stuff. Walking to school and running amok as a kid and getting in the right kind of trouble. Growing up, loved to fish, mostly fly fishing. My dad's a passionate fly fisherman, so he passed that on to my brother and I at a young age. So fished a bunch of the beautiful and really famous premier streams up in Northern California, Oregon, the Klamath, the Trinity, and the Great Sacramento for primarily steelhead, trout and steelhead. And so grew up doing that. Grew up shooting, with my dad, mostly plinking at cans and things like that. And then, got recruited to play lacrosse at Syracuse up in central New York. In that era, that was one of the real titans on the battlefield of lacrosse. That sport has grown just off the charts throughout the country. I mean, when I played, it was mostly an Eastern Seaboard sport. Coming from California was a complete anomaly, and it just was a gift. I got to play at one of the top teams, compete for the championship every, or get close to it every year. We won 2 national championships while I was there, and then my senior year was trying to figure out what I wanted to do next, and definitely didn't have a plan. I don't think most young Lions do. I think plenty of people say they do, and I think very few people know where they want to go. I'm jealous of the person that has a path early on. I'm not sure if it's healthy, but it's at least focused. But I am somewhat jealous of people that are like, my great grandfather was a bootmaker, my father was a bootmaker, and I want to be a bootmaker. It just feels like that'd be the deal if you knew that's what you wanted to do, and I certainly didn't. So. I read a book that Winston Churchill penned kind of at the end of his life about his early years, and that book just was like a siren call for service, and that military service would be the right place to kind of start, my young adult life and kind of cut my teeth as a man and maybe earn a seat at the table of this great country. And so I walked into a recruiter's office. I did a little bit of research and found out that the SEALs had the highest attrition rate or the highest fail rate of any special operations unit, and that just felt like the right type challenge for me. And I'd grown up in and around the water, so I knew the aquatic component to being a frogman and a SEAL was the right place for me. And so launched a career in the late 90s, and it's taken me through. I actually will retire as a commander in the reserves this coming summer, but 13 active duty years. Very, very lucky in my timing. I got to be an assault team leader through, probably one of the most intense windows of SEAL combat operations in the global war on terror. And I also got some pre-9/11 time, which was a lot of fun to have both those experiences. And then since then it's been a strange set of adventures and circumstances. The Navy asked us to be actual actors or participants in this film called Act of Valor that came out about 4 or 5 years ago, and we thought we were making this recruiting film that probably end up at the bottom of a Walmart DVD case and never see the light of day, and ends up being the #1 movie in America. We stayed very under the radar as to kind of who we were, but I'd gone back to grad school. I knew it was time for me to get out. I really wanted to be around my bride and my kiddos and the administrative side of being a SEAL commander and officer, although some of my best friends are still doing it, and thank God they are, to run those teams with the best leadership you can find. I just knew it didn't really appeal to me, and it was time to do something else. And so I've done some writing, a couple books that are out there in the ether, and then a whole lot of speaking on leadership, high performance teams, culture. And so corporate America, can find me, and I come in and fire them up and keep them focused. And I do that for huge stage events. I do it for small executive teams, and now growing that side of the business into different offerings and different adventures, and that gets us to here.
What's your brand called that you're you have your own brand now.
I do, yeah. If you go to RorkeDenver.com, all one word, RorkeDenver.com, that takes you to my website. And the brand is called Ever Onward. I used to sign all my, you do a tremendous amount of writing, particularly as an officer in the United States military. Having an English degree is actually a huge attribute as an officer in the United States military, as opposed to math and science. Not like those guys and gals can't write, but being able to write is a huge advantage, because you will spend a lot of your career doing so, whether that be after action reports or proposals on how to get things done. And so just in basic email correspondence, I used to sign all my there's the tradition of basically a very respectfully. So you'll see at the bottom of almost every email, it'll be either be a capital V / lowercase r. If the person outranks you, is usually a capital V / uppercase R, and then it's very respectfully, and you kind of sign your name. And then I always added Onward. I just like the idea of kind of constantly moving forward. Generally in a fight, there's times to, I don't like the word retreat, there's times to probably pull back or regroup, but generally the person that advances the fight, whether that be in the octagon, at a bar fight, or out in full-scale combat, usually the person progressing the fight, advancing the fight, has the tactical advantage. So something about Onward always was a way I liked signing my emails. Then Ever Onward seemed like the greatest expression of that term. So that's why I started my brand Ever Onward, which is a leadership, culture, performance brand that tries to help individuals, companies, executive teams, senior leaders perform at their absolute highest.
Man. I don't want to talk about either of our backgrounds.
You don't want to compare how cool we are now. This one time I typed this email, and it was intense. It was really intense.
I think most of us that serve, it's funny you say that. A lot of people say that or do that, when I get in conversations. And I think those of us that whatever, I guess, have some resume that people at least respond to, rarely had that as part of their plan, right? I mean, I didn't ever try and build some path that was going to lead somewhere. That when people ask me what's your 5-year plan, I don't understand the person that can do that. I mean, it kind of goes back to the bootmaker, the person that can look long range and have that strategic vision, of which I have a few friends that are absolutely remarkable in their ability to predict where they want to be, what steps they need to take to get to where they want to be, is not a skill or a desire I've ever had. So I feel like I can only control the now. If I get through, close a business today, I feel pretty good about things, and I'll at least have something on the calendar next. But in general, I like kind of living in the moment. So all of these things I look back and reflect on. In many ways, I think they surprise me as much as anybody would comment on them. It's just been, the path that was there, and I do think I tried to take hard paths as opposed to easy paths. I think that if I could do anything for my kiddos is implore them to do the same. Take the hard path, take the rough road, because it usually leads to some level of adventure. Or if it leads to absolute disaster, if you survive it, you're gonna learn from it. So
you've got me interested in. So back up to the to the 90s, right? You're playing lacrosse. I was going to make a comment about how you were playing lacrosse before anybody knew what lacrosse was.
No,
but you kind of addressed that.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. No, it did not explode the way
now
it is
it's
now.
everywhere.
Yeah,
it's unbelievable.
remarkable.
Especially the Denver area has an incredible lacrosse.
The
presence.
West in general. I mean, the West is. I think the scales of power are going to shift, and I think they're going to shift west. A lot of good athletes coming out of this area. All the big teams are recruiting big players from the West, and I played against a coach. Coach Bill Tierney, who coaches Denver, and he's coached them to national championships and national prominence on the Division I stage. And I think that's going to continue to drift west. I mean, we got better weather, we got better opportunity to play out here, and so as those youth programs grow, it's just going to get nothing but bigger. Yeah.
But the one thing I really wanted to ask you about, so you said something that I thought maybe that kind of team sport, that kind of event might have been one of the things that triggered you want to get into military service. But you focused in on this book you read by Winston Churchill.
Yeah.
And I know from having talked to you in the past that Churchill's been a big, it's not just one book. It's Churchill generally has been a pretty big influence. But what about it specifically? What about Winston Churchill motivated you or gave you that spark that said, this is my path?
Yeah. You're a reader, so you love to read, and I think everyone that reads finds people that really speak to them. And that's, maybe that's 10, 15 writers or authors, and maybe it's one. I probably have a handful that have just, every given Sunday you're going to pick up a book and be like, man, I love the way this is written. I love the words, and I'm going to probably buy everything they ever wrote. Churchill probably stands supreme. You're talking one of the greatest. Nobody would argue of the 20th century, the level of prominence he brought to the world stage, and in particular, self-promoted, self-induced as far as his ability to, write his own story and write his own history. But I just think his command of the English language, a lot of kind of personal similarities in so much that he struggled horribly with math and kind of some of the basic courses that you had to succeed in to move forward to British upper class or British high performance. You had to have this level of capacity across, big spectrum of disciplines, whether that's math, science, reading, writing, all those things. And so he actually ended up in like the class for dummies, like up through high school. And I kind of did the same. I had a terrible learning disability that really affected my ability to sequence numbers and still does. So just basic math, those type concepts, scheduling and timing of things is very, very hard for my brain to kind of work around. At the same time, when I either speak or when I write, I'm able to, without self-promoting, I think find words and find threads the way I want to communicate ideas, concepts, what I believe in and what I'm seeing, hopefully in an impactful way. And his ability to do that was just off the chart. So if you took a copy of my early life, like the paperback copy that I still physically own that has tape on the back of it that my dad gave me my senior year of college, so we're talking 1996, I don't think there's 4 pages go by without me having a little, tag in there where I made a note or something struck me, just in the way he thought and therefore communicated it through written word. It was just glorious language. It was just command of these concepts that were important to me. And so it was a lot of things. It wasn't any one passage, any words. It was just maybe this general sense of going to seek adventure, and that seeking leadership positions and adventure, certainly in the combat theater, tends to open up and maybe round out a young man's level of intensity and kind of desire for being part of big events and prepares you for bigger events down the road, which it obviously did for him. The man's, was in an actual cavalry charge with a drawn sword up through the atomic age, leading his country through, certainly arguably one of the most horrific wars the world has ever seen. And so something about that just struck a chord with me. It was like, look, this is where I want to start. My buddies are going to go try and get jobs, and I want to go get in the hot seat and see what comes out the other side.
You know who he reminds me of? Maybe there aren't the parallels. Maybe you can explain why it's so much different. But his story reminds me a lot of Teddy Roosevelt's story. Mm-hmm. Like they're quite similar.
No, a lot of parallels.
Yeah.
A lot of parallels. Yeah.
So and I I'm a big Teddy Roosevelt enthusiast, and one of my favorite books of his is Rough Riders.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's that. And you can draw a lot of parallels between his experiences there and talking about him growing up. Mm-hmm. And he was born into a family of wealth and class, but he didn't really fit in, and he had to go find himself different places.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Then he led this charge of like misfits, right?
Yeah. And he never stopped. You read River of Doubt and his trip, in the Amazon.
Yeah.
You're like, this is not a young man after defeat in the political theater where most people just cashed in, instead of like, well, I'm just going to go get old and kick my feet up and, knock out a couple cigars. He's like, I'll just go run the Amazon.
Yeah, not just run the Amazon, but I'm going to go map out
uncharted
territory in the Amazon.
Yeah.
Right? And nearly killed him.
Yeah.
Nearly killed him.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, incredible. I read that book because of after talking to you and seeing how much you like that book. But I think I became aware of you when I read the book Damn Few, and I've talked about this. I'm kind of a fan of reading that genre. Books that are written by modern military guys, and I think it truly was one of the to me it was a classic because I think it was just cerebral and different.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
There's something that really spoke to me because there's a lot of books that are just they may be story based and action based, but to me there was something deeper in that book where it always came back around to those were experiences that you had, but it always came back to lessons found about yourself. Lessons found in challenging yourself, determining who you were, and even though I said we type for a living. To me, that's something that was I loved it because I love that concept of the importance of challenging yourself and like this idea that, and I totally agree with it, that in order to, wherever you're from, if you're not finding something to challenge, something to struggle against, like you're atrophying as an individual. And I felt like I got that out of that book. I mean, to me, it's one of the great reads, and anybody who hasn't read it needs to pick up a copy. It's good.
Oh, I appreciate it. I mean, that probably is a little bit of a pedigree from reading Churchill and reading some of these, great histories of far greater men than me. But that in writing something that was a little bit autobiographical and had a thread or at least an arc that covered, my life to date, that if I'm just writing about myself, that's the wrong path to go down. If I use stories and lessons and experiences I've had to hopefully communicate greater ideals, bigger picture concepts that can help, someone other than me, then that would be worth its time. And so that was the goal. So if you got that out of it, that's good stuff.
Hey, what's your how many books have you written?
2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's your process? And maybe I should explain that a little bit more.
Yeah.
But or flesh that a little bit more. But as somebody
Dave would really like to write a book as good as damn few.
No, so I say it partially selfishly because I do write, but my writing and my publications tend to be much shorter. It's to be able to thread pieces together, to pull a story together that can be compelling and engaging for several hundred pages, and just the thought process and the planning that goes into doing that, and to getting it to the point where you're comfortable then exposing yourself to turning it over to an editor and then letting the public soak that in. There's an amount of vulnerability. I feel it when I write. Even when I write for a few different magazines, and I feel it when I do a 2,000 word story, right? This vulnerability of putting yourself out there to be judged by everybody. And now you're talking about doing it in the context of a much larger book. And I'm just curious about your kind of that process of what you go through to take these ideas and put them on paper and get to a place where you feel comfortable saying, "Yep, I'm ready to let somebody else read this."
Yeah, I mean, I think you said something even in your question that I think you could appreciate, that I think a 2,000 word, 1,000 word piece in my mind would be significantly harder to do than 300, 400 and count up the number of pages. And I simply say that because this is another kind of Churchill concept that if you can explain something on a single piece of paper, you've achieved something. Whereas over 1,200 pages, well, if you can't explain it or just run with whatever you're doing in that period of time, that it's easier to do longer.
Well, wasn't it Mark Twain I think it was Mark Twain's comment that said, "I would have written you a shorter letter, but I didn't have enough time."
For sure,
right?
For sure. That's definitely the case.
But I appreciate you saying that, but I completely disagree. Because I find it so incredibly it's motivating to see people write full books, but it's a bit overwhelming in my mind too.
I'm not trying to belittle the intimidation of sitting down and doing it. There's a couple things that were at play. One, first and foremost, I had help. So I work with a co-writer. I put him on the cover of my book. There's plenty of folks that write in the modern era across political public life that have genuine ghostwriters that write their books for them utterly. They never touch a piece of paper, and then they don't put that person on the cover and like, "Oh, I wrote it." And you're like, "Oh, did you?" Because I don't think you did. I put Ellis Hennigan, who's become a good buddy and friend. He and I both worked on both books together, and so he is a professional writer. He's a journalist. He's a great thinker. He's become a good buddy, and the thing that was great about working with him is he helped do what you're describing, which is, one, he'd done it before, so he knows what it takes to get a narrative put together in a bigger format. The thing that was the biggest advantage working with him is the way we decided to do the process was basically he would interview me just verbally. We'd sit down and we did, I think for damn few, I think we had 16 some odd hours of interview time on tape. And so he'd just interview me like a journalist about stories, topics, my thoughts on things. And so I think we took that, we sent it to this gal who transcribed all of it. And so we probably had 180 pages of just raw conversation before we ever started sitting down to a typewriter. So that's a lot of kind of grist for the mill if you start looking at, hey, there's a lot of material here. How do we flesh this out into greater stories? The thing that was cool about it is when I'd be talking about something that I was excited about, he would rarely be excited about it, often because it was just he'd heard it, he knew a little bit about that part of the story, and that was something that maybe the public had digested through other media, books, interviews, and so on. And then I'd tell a one-off story that I didn't think was all that interesting, and he'd be jumping out of his seat. Like, we got to write about that. I haven't heard that before. That's why we should attack this. So he was really good at chunking those parts out and saying, this is what we should then flesh out. And then our process from there is he'd basically start just to kind of build a chapter. He'd send it to me as soon as he kind of just cranked one out. And this guy is a grinder. One of the reasons we get along is that guy can write a New York Times bestseller, which is not the requirement for a good read, as much as even the Pulitzer Prize is. I mean, I've read a bunch of those books, and very few of them are particularly readable. But anyway, he was really good at doing that. He'd send me a chapter, then I'd go through it with a ton of red ink. I'd add parts that I thought I wanted to write and really have in my voice, go back to him, and then we'd get to a 90% type solution, and then we kind of got done with the whole thing, and then we just went back through it. I sent it to my dad, I sent it to my brother, all started kind of grinding through it to say where do things come across the way we want them to, where don't they, and let's kind of just massage it and get it to where it needed to be. So for those two books, I had help. That was a big part. That's the way we went about the process of kind of writing it. The second book, Worth Dying For, is much more almost a collection of essays. You could read chapter 8 and read chapter 4, read chapter 12, read chapter 1, and you wouldn't be missing any narrative thread that went through it. Not so with the first book. But that's how we went about it. But I would tell you, and I would tell anyone listening, if they have any desire to write a book, one, to do it. I think it's worth doing because you'll regret it. I think if you don't, and why not, throw your hat into doing something hard. And then on top of that is the best piece of advice I got, I think really kind of came, and this might not be his quote, but Stephen Pressfield, who wrote Gates of Fire, which is another fantastic kind of warrior novel. It's about the 300 Spartans at Thermopylae, and I think he wrote the best version of that battle of anyone, but he has become a friend and a mentor. And when he was talking about it, I was like, look, that writing a book and writing in general is 100% perspiration as opposed to inspiration. Like, if you think you're just going to sit there and the muse is going to call out to you every time you sit down to start writing, it ain't. And if you sit down and just write a lot, you'll find it, and you'll find it in certain periods of time, and then you got to take advantage of that. And when the muse leaves you, you got to keep grinding until she comes back. And I think that's 100% true, that it really is grinding more than it is saying, oh, I hope the great idea comes.
I agree with you 100% on that. I've got a story I'm working on writing, and I've had to set it aside for a year. It's highly personal. Yeah. It involves a family friend, right? So I think Nephi, I may have told you this before, but so in the late 90s, a family moved to Cheyenne, which is where I grew up. Mm-hmm. Right? Family moved to Cheyenne, and the patriarch of the family became the state public defender for the state, and his daughter went to school with me. She was my prom date, senior year of high school. Became very close with the family. Became very close with him. I went through law school. He tried to recruit me to come, work for the public defender's office. Yeah. I couldn't do that for various reasons. I could get into it another time, right? Yeah. That's sort of the little backstory. He big backpacker, big backcountry backpacker. You look at him, and you wouldn't look at him as the type of guy that this is a guy that climbs mountains unroped. This is a guy that goes into the backcountry for days, week at a time, all by himself. He just doesn't fit the profile. Coke bottle glasses, kind of shorter guy. Yeah. But just super, super amazing guy. He goes up into the Wind River Mountains of Wyoming in 2006, and there's a mountain called Mount Bonneville in this range. Mount Bonneville was named after Colonel Bonneville, who was the person that was from the U.S. Army that was credited with finding South Pass for the Oregon Trail, for finding passage through the West through the Oregon Trail, finding a place for wagons. So Mount Bonneville, ironically enough, is named after him, but he never actually went up and climbed that mountain. Right, that mountain was climbed 100 years later. So this is in this guy's eyes, this mountain is a sentinel of the Wind Rivers. and he has these journals, and I've read all of his journals, and he has these journals, and he goes up to the winds, and this is the mountain. This is the place he's got to go. The first time he sees it, he describes it in these journals as just this inspirational, unbelievable place, right? And he takes several trips there, year after year. And the first journal entries talk about it as this unattainable peak, this unclimbable peak, right? It's too dangerous, can't be done. You know, at very least you have to have technical ropes, and you got to have the experience, and you should have people with you. And over the course of a decade, it morphs into convincing his buddies that it's just a scramble. It's just a scramble. And he had this trip lined up to go climb it, and his buddies that were going to go with them had to bail, and he was there by himself. And the last journal entry that they find his camp. Last journal entry that he wrote was, fell 3 times today. Scrapes, bruises, must be more careful. It's the last thing written in there.
Wow.
A week later, they find his body at the base of this mountain, right?
Yeah.
They find his camera. They find a memory card in it. That memory card, when they pop it in, there's a picture of him sitting on top of that mountain. He managed to conquer it. He fell off on his 56th birthday.
Oh, my goodness. Yep.
Right. So they think he died on his birthday.
Yeah.
And then the rescue team that found him, this famous family, the Skinner family. Todd Skinner is a world-class climber, right? They're the ones that recovered his body and brought it off the mountain, informed the family. 3 months later, Todd Skinner died in a climbing accident in California. So I'm trying to, and then there's other pieces to this.
Yeah.
There's still a pack on the side of that mountain of his that's tucked away. I know where it is because a guy found it and contacted the family and said, here it is.
Wow.
And so I organized what was going to be a rescue mission. It was going to go get that stuff back for the family. And we got up there and we couldn't do it. Right, so we had a big toast at the base of the mountain.
Yeah.
And maybe it's better that it's just left up there.
Yeah, maybe so.
And yet I can't write that story.
Yeah.
Like I can sort of tell it.
As I say, it's a great story. It sounds like a good book to me, man.
And I can't get it down on paper.
Yeah.
And so it's just sort of,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's hard. It's
Yeah.
really hard.
Yep.
And sometimes you get those blocks and you got to put things aside for a while.
Yeah. It sounds like a good tale.
Yeah, there's something powerful.
It is. I just can't finish it.
No, I hear you.
You want to do right by the family.
Yeah, of course.
Powerful, I think, powerful and admirable about that kind of mindset. And it's interesting, man. It drives me. And I'd like to think that that's something, and I don't know, like I'd like to think that desire to overcome like lives inside of everybody.
That's a good death. I mean, I can say I've talked about this a couple of times, and I think people are, I've had a couple of people I think be a little critical of it, but most people I think in general hear that I mean it when I say it. I've attended too many funerals, and I've seen, caskets with buddies in them with that beautiful American flag draped over it. And I think a warrior, a true warrior, which I count most of my teammates as, can't look at that casket and that flag without a little bit of jealousy. Just a little twinge of that guy died as good as anybody's ever going to go out. I mean, that, I hope I'm old and gray and, grow a big Viking beard and am, smoking a pipe or a cigar on a porch and running my grandkids ragged through the woods and having fun. I hope to see those days, but it's unlikely if you make it to that point, you're going to die well, So I think warriors, there's native real principles that have gone across, basically the entire world in history that, young warriors seek out their death, and that's a good one, man. I mean, him coming off that mountain on his birthday, pretty hard to think he would have died any better.
And the very last picture on his camera being himself conquering that mountain he's been wanting to conquer for a decade. He did it.
Yep.
And you talk about do something hard, challenge yourself. That was his thing.
For sure.
Right? Do something. And he conquered it.
My hat's off to him.
Like how many people, and I mean, I don't want to make it glib if people feel this way, but how many people would trade living a whole long time, in your basement on the couch to get gray for living well, for living vibrantly, and not knowing when the end is going to be.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think obviously, everybody that, I'm assuming everybody that listens to you guys, a large portion of them like being out in wild country, like hunting, like pursuing game and going into dangerous ground. And it's just good stuff, putting yourself out on the ragged edge. It feels like you learn good lessons. You feel good about your life. It's just, invigorating and recharging when you're not doing that every day. And, but it comes with a price tag.
Well, can we talk a little bit about what you've done? So I know you're still in the reserves, right?
Yeah.
But since you left active duty, right, and you've built your brand, you're starting your business, you've written these books, but there's probably a piece of you that seeks, there's adventure out there, right?
Yeah.
What have you done to fill that piece?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a constant pursuit. I don't think it's any one thing. I do think hunting, big game hunting is not something I did growing up. Like I said, fishing and going into wild country where there are bears and, lions and all kinds of fun stuff and canyons that you could obviously get yourself in big trouble in. There's probably actually not a huge difference with that compared to the big game, but something about the big game hunting has really satisfied a huge part of that personality. The one for one, when I talk to veterans that aren't hunters, I tell them like, man, he or she, you really need to consider it, because everything that we did, particularly as special operators, it's almost like a one for one. I mean, it's the same game in my mind with better outcomes. I hope our end state results in some of these nations are nations that will be able to pick themselves up by their bootstraps and do better things. I read a great article in the Journal this morning by this Afghan woman talking about being a kid under Taliban rule, now being, older or adult-ish, living in Kabul and be able to walk around in heels and, stay out late and listen to music she wants to, and this tremendous fear about having to go back to Taliban rule if it's abdicated and they take power again. It's just amazing article today. But I think that, when I look at hunting, it's just like, look, you start poring over maps. You start looking at the weather. You put a gear list together. You pack your gear. You unpack it because you want to repack it and make sure you didn't forget anything. And then you kind of reconsider, what else do I need? What can I do to cut weight? Then we're going to start looking at tactics of pursuing an animal and patterning their way of life and the seasons and how we're going to make that work. And then, getting into a position, putting a stock on, closing distance with, it's not an enemy, but closing distance with your quarry. And then if you get that good shot and do everything right, the end result of this is wonderful. Now you get to actually pack it out and hopefully eat it. I don't really hunt anything that I'm not going to eat. I guess there's a couple things we shoot at that, but generally that's practice to shoot at something that I'm going to eat, and in general, that's how we're providing food in our family. But and then on top of that, there's so much conversation currently about the defense of this lifestyle and this pursuit. And I don't hear too many people talking about it, but I feel like I want to inject, and this will be maybe the first time I said it, just to how much fun it is. I feel like I'm getting tired of, I don't get pressed that often by people that are just anti-hunter space type people. I think, bigger names like our buddy Stephen Rennell and folks like that are constantly in that conversation and constantly in some level in that fight. I'm probably in a charmed position in that I don't have to defend it. I don't do it for a living, and not that many people push me on it. But I could end with, if it's a hell of a lot of fun. I could probably end the entire conversation with, it's a ton of fun. That's one of the big reasons I do it.
Do you think there's a stigma against hunters being able to actually say that right now?
Maybe.
Yeah. Can we actually say,
I don't know.
I do this because
I don't know.
Fun?
I'm saying it, and I don't know how many ears are going to hear it, but I'd say it again on any platform that somebody asks me. I think this becomes one of the problems, is that we're starting to get, I think, scared of what we can say and not say. And by no means there's things that are on my mind that I probably would like to say that I haven't, not in the hunting space, just in the world space, that I think people aren't open to. And I think some of those things might be coming. I think we're at a juncture where if we probably don't grab the reins of certain things, we could go down a road from which we won't return, as a country. And as somebody that fought under that flag, that's tough to watch and see, of course. And I think our culture's in a real fragile place right now. So I think being in those conversations are important. But yeah, again, I don't know how many people are going to hear me say this today, but I'm telling you right now, like it's just a lot of fun. And
hundreds of thousands.
There you go, man. There you go. We'll push it as far as we can push it.
That's what we like to hear. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think about that a lot. I have the privilege of knowing you and some other veterans here I consider really, good friends, and going out and spend some time in the great outdoors with them. And I think that one of the things that I come back to, I don't know if you guys, I don't know if it means as much to me as for me. Like if somebody were to, when you guys, when you say something, I'm like, you need to listen to what that guy has to say. And well, why? And for me, if people disrespect that, it's because literally there's a group of people that are out there dying for our rights, who literally they are losing, they're losing friends. They put themselves at risk. And even when they come back, like maybe they've lost relationships, they certainly have sacrificed time. And so I think, that's one of the things that troubles me about kind of the direction of the country now is like this, as people try to take liberty for granted. It's just to say like, man, this liberty is paid for. These things have been paid for. We have to appreciate these things, and you better dang well give respect to somebody who, when they tell you what they think about them, those people who've served, because they've earned the right to tell you what they think.
Yeah. I mean, the nice thing about being a warrior or serving in this era of kind of our culture is that I think some of the lessons, I wrote about this a little bit in Worth Dying For, but I think some of the lessons out of Vietnam and how poorly the culture treated those men and women that served, just a breach of a national trust you can't even wrap your head around when a bunch of those folks were even conscripted or drafted to go do that job. Regardless of the politics, they were just doing their best and doing their duty to country. I think the blight and the ugliness of their return, hopefully really set the stage for a much different experience this go around. I mean, I think there's obviously a big part of the country and culture that wants nothing to do with war and nothing to do with going to prosecute those missions overseas. But I haven't seen, other than in extreme kind of aberrations of people's behavior, any negative really get put on the troops. I mean, I've had nothing but pats on my back for my service, and even from folks that I think don't believe we should have been over there. So I think that's been a real gift to kind of have participated in this experiment, in this era, that the support for the troops has just been otherworldly. The bigger issue to me is not so much that a veteran needs to be listened to, although I think veterans, particularly those that have spent a lot of time in ugly parts of the world and seen what in my mind are cultures that have gone down, I think a very, very, repressive, ugly road it's an explicit example of where this human direction can go. And so when I see the country fragmented and, young people talking about, yeah, we're all for socialism and we want to go this route, you're like, the results are there. This is not an unknown path. We know where this path goes, and then you get all these young folks that say, well, it just hasn't been implemented right. And the only person that says that is the person that thinks they can do it better, and they won't. It's just been proven. I mean, that's the thing that's so funny about, not to go into some big political thing, but, capitalism, socialism, communism, it all ends up in the same place. Just, the other two result in hundreds of millions of people's death, and somebody gets to pick who wins as opposed to you get to compete to win. Yeah, I mean, when you see those parts of the world and you see what we enjoy here, it does make you scratch your head at watching what's important to people. And a lot of it is such base level psychology too. I mean, you look at a young person that's going to vote their paycheck, they're like, oh, sure, well, if I don't have to work and somebody can do it for me, I mean, that I could see that being appealing. I think those of us that are in front of that bow wave know the work and the energy and the effort you put forth to get a good result is what makes it taste good. Yeah. And that's something given. I want nothing to do with winning a lottery. I don't play, I don't gamble. I don't put in to buy lottery tickets. The lottery could go to $9 billion. I will not go into 7-Eleven to buy a ticket because I just feel kooky if I got that dollar amount.
I'm looking at Nephi over here, who he's a gigantic sinner.
Hey, just so you know,
in his church for all the lottery tickets he buys.
In my former life, I helped establish the Wyoming Lottery Corporation
so he feels,
at the direction of my boss. So I feel obligated. So if I win it, Dave, I'm not doing it for me. I'm doing it to support the state of Wyoming.
And I'm glad you do. I do not buy lottery tickets. I would think in Colorado it might be different. I might actually consider buying a lottery ticket in Colorado because I know where that money's going.
Right.
And that money in Colorado, a lot of that money is going back into conservation.
Yeah. No, there's great benefits of the dollars that go into those pots. I see that. My point is, as you can draw, is the higher thing. If somebody brought me a huge check, we're not going to win it. That just said, look, now you get to do whatever you want. I'd be like, man, that's just not going to go. And look, it bears out. Like they've done studies and books of the people that win those things, and almost all of them end up back in a double wide, divorced, unhappy, miserable, and out of money. You're like, good job. It's because you just given to you. I mean, it's everything is just. It's just funny to me how much we know about human nature and behavior and how many people want to fight against it. When we talk about free handouts, I mean, outdoorsmen know it. You feed the bears, and the bears won't start feeding themselves. Okay, well, we're the same.
I mean. Shifting gears a little bit. I mean, that's one of the reasons I love the great outdoors. It's one of the reasons I love hunting. It's one of the reasons, I like to compete in kind of these, fake adventures like the adventure race type stuff. Because I love to there's just something really rewarding about putting yourself at risk and just challenging yourself and trying to break yourself, and then not breaking and just being, and just saying, I will not be broken. That's, I mean, it
doesn't have to be a physical thing either. Right.
It doesn't just challenging yourself.
Absolutely not. I mean, that's the one thing that we talk about the things we do in the outdoors all the time, and you're pushing yourself to some physical limits and mental limits, but it doesn't have to be that. Right. There are all sorts of things. By no means.
Right? Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
No, my bride is just got into musical theater. So she's jumping up on stage. I mean, she can sing, so she also has some of the talents that make that achievable. That being said, it's no less vulnerable and gutsy to get up on stage and perform in front of people and do that. And she's found that in her mid-30s, and that's I mean, she's like, I'm not just going to sit around. I want to do something. I want to push myself and try something new. And it's just been a massive growth moment in her life. Learn a language, go get a degree, learn a skill. Those are the things that all those things you move forward, you just become better for it.
Step outside of your comfort zone.
For
right?
sure.
Take a chance every now and then.
For sure.
Yeah, I wish I could say I had great talents, but one of the reasons I like the things that I like to do is because I've discovered that I just have a gift for suffering. So now, having said that,
no, let me tell you really quick.
There's a guy sitting across the table who has a gift for suffering. I want to ask you some more questions about that in a minute.
Yeah, I want to touch really quickly on something you said about you don't have any talents, right? Some people are born with the ability to do certain things better than other people, maybe. I'm not 100% convinced because, you have some innate genetic ability in certain places. But people are talented. You have to pull that curtain back and look at the hours and hours, hundreds or thousands of hours dedicated to that craft so that somebody can, for example, sit in an audience and watch somebody sing and watch somebody, perform on stage and say, I could never do that. They're so talented. They might have talent, but part of the talent is recognizing you've got something and then perfecting your craft.
Yeah,
and
sure.
So you are talented. Levi, you are talented.
Thanks,
my
Dave.
point is you are talented.
No.
You are talented, and you're talented in a lot of things. And one of the things you're particularly that I've seen you talented in is you are an exceptionally good shooter, right? And
he hasn't seen a lot of great shooters, but I'll take it.
But you're good. And why are you good? Because you've perfected your craft, right? You've spent hours and hours and perfecting that craft. And so I think, as far as that's kind of getting down to the root of motivating somebody to step outside their comfort zone. You don't say I'm not talented. Everybody's got a talent somewhere. Everybody got something that they can be good at. You have to dedicate yourself to it and push yourself to do it.
So you have seen a lot of people succeed. So I'm going to go back to your time. So you were the Navy SEAL commander in charge of all aspects of SEAL training. Is that right?
I was officer in charge of first phase for a block of time. That's Hell Week, so that's where the bulk of the attrition takes place. Yeah. Then I was what's called the operations officer of all three phases. Hell Week, which is first phase, then dive phase, then third phase, which is demolitions, combat, and kind of the learning the actual craft. Then I went on to be the executive officer in charge of advanced training. So that's all the polish schools: sniper, hand-to-hand fighting, language, free fall, all those different advanced courses. So I'd say in the full spectrum of curriculum that you can receive as a SEAL, I've been part of the leadership team that ran all of that. Yeah.
So there's a lot of dudes like me who are like in your head, you're like, like the Al Bundy syndrome is like, if I could go back, if I could, I could throw this ball over that mountain. I'd throw
4 touchdowns in a single game.
Throw it right over that mountain. What is the difference between those people? Because you've seen success and you've seen a lot of failure.
Yeah.
What's the difference?
This is the $1 million question when it comes to SEAL training and Special Operations Unit, particularly SEALs, because we've had the highest attrition rate for the longest period of time. So we've had psych docs, sports physiologists, witch doctors. I mean, every type of person that can evaluate our training program has. And I think some truths have come out of it. A whole bunch of guesswork has gone into it. And so I think it's hard to say. I used to give a real long answer to this. I used to give this about mental toughness and resilience and seeing the finish line and knowing how to work as an athlete through this set of principles that are going to get you success. I make it real easy at this point, and it really is the only thing. If you don't quit, you're basically going to become a SEAL. I mean, it's just like we're just talking about talent. SEALs aren't talented in some way other than other operators or other members that serve in the military. I don't think I was born with more courage or more mental, physical toughness than the next person. I mean, I think my body and those that make it through do tend to have a body that is capable of withstanding a certain amount of abuse. And there's a component where every once in a while you'll see a young lion that comes through the program and his body betrays him, and that's brutal. Like the person that has the mentality won't quit no matter what we throw at them, but they get stress fractures or, something goes wrong with their heart, their shoulders fall apart, their joints, degrade, and you're just like, God, man, I wish we could do something about that, but your physiology literally is not allowing you to get to the finish line. So that just is. I mean, that's one of those tough things that you can't do much about. And in the end, if that person, upon reflection, takes time to think about it, it really wasn't for them. Because what do we do? If we grandfather that person in, then they're out on an operational assault team and their body can't withstand things, we can't wait. We got to keep moving. I mean, we don't leave somebody behind. But you know what I'm saying? You need to have a level of performance. So that's there. In the end, it's just not quitting. I mean, if you don't quit, you are probably going to see the finish line of that place. We don't drop that many people from training. We will. Occasionally somebody just doesn't, maybe have the intellectual horsepower to kind of, either learn what we need them to learn, or much less intellectual horsepower, just the ability to adapt and understand all the different skill sets we need them to perform at a very, very high level to ensure our mission success once we get out in that place. It really comes down to not giving up. I mean, if there's one thing I could bottle and give to my kiddos, I'd be like, just don't quit. I mean, just don't quit. There's times to, maybe transition. If you say, hey, I want to be the greatest of X and you're just not designed. I'm like, I'm just not going to play in the NBA. I'm not designed to play at that level. If you've ever been around, I've had a chance through consulting to be around some of the pro athletes in this world, folks that are playing in the NFL. That is just, God decides who's playing in that league. Like your genetic makeup that goes there. I mean, I'm all for hard work. I mean, like you just look at some of like I was at a game and I happened to be and buddies with the owner of the Niners. He came out for a preseason game here against Denver, and I was down the sideline, and I'm not a small dude, and the kicker for the Niners walks past me. I'm like, the kicker's bigger than me. Yeah, sweet. I mean, it's just a different deal, But to your point, Dave, we're talking about talent. I mean, talent's wasted probably more than anything else on earth, and it's also one of those things that you just got to apply a tremendous amount of grit and effort to. That's what allows talent to flourish, right? I mean, Michael Jordan had all the physical gifts and coordinated gifts you could have. He also was known to stay later than anybody at practice and take more free throws than anybody at practice. You're like, look, that's not a small thing that he just. I mean, it's totally possible if someone else had put in the same amount of time as him, they would have been him. So he coupled both those things.
Well, and that's what I was going to mention too, because you talk about some people, God decides, right?
Yeah.
God decides they have the physical tools.
For sure.
They decide they can apply those tools. Because I've seen a lot of incredible athletes that probably could make it to the NBA or to the NFL if they'd apply themselves and put in the work.
No, I don't
like
mean to
Michael
belittle
Jordan.
all those people that have that physical gift, the ability to play at that level. Only the ones that are going to grind, work, and push are going to play at the highest levels, for sure.
Right.
Sure. Yeah. There's plenty of fat, tall guys and fat, big guys that aren't playing in the NFL that probably could have. Yeah, for sure.
That's exactly right.
For sure.
So I've seen that no quit in you. We've on a couple different. I know you've picked up hunting and love it.
Yeah, I'm crazy about it.
And so and that was. I've got a great story that will, to be told some other day about following you around the middle of a desert someplace. Chasing elk and you were pretty mad.
Yeah,
and I don't know how long we hiked, but I remember looking over and I wanted to be all chatty. I'm like, you know what? It's time to just swallow your tongue. I'm not going to say a word. He will decide when he's going to talk.
Yeah,
that was a ton of fun.
This doesn't have to wait for another day. I want to hear this now.
It'll wait for another day because I want to hear a different story.
Yeah.
When I have unlimited time.
I actually need to write that story. I've got notes of that day, and I've meant to write a story kind of for Field and Stream or one of those type magazines that Outdoor Life or something. I probably have to hit you guys up. I do need to write that story. That was a pivotal story, both in my hunting experience because I was new, and then part of that story will very much be the fact that you had the presence of mind
to shut my mouth.
Shut up because you were right on the border of getting decapitated.
So I got to ask you a sidebar question. You can tell me later if you want.
Yeah.
How'd you get him to shut up?
He's a lot scarier looking than Dave.
I think I was
it's a size factor.
Radiating a level of intensity that made him pick up on those cues.
He was carrying a suppressed AR platform, and I was like, you know what? Let's just shut up today.
Yeah.
We'll just be quiet. But you,
it's actually one of the reasons we're friends. I'll tell you this right now. I'll write about this article. Had you not stopped when you stopped, we might not be sitting here right now, let alone your physical well-being. But no, it is one of those things. I feel like one of the things that's tough transitioning from the SEAL teams is, I said this the other day when I was talking to somebody, you join this fraternity that is basically like this league of extraordinary gentlemen. It's just unbelievable people to surround yourself with, and that's across all the special operations. We got buddies from Delta and all the joint units that we spend time with on hunts up in Wyoming, and there's not a single one of those people that is not of the same caliber, the same ilk, the same style, although they come from different backgrounds. But
except John Burns,
when you that's a talented guy too. But no, when you drop out of that fraternity, it is sort of over. It's strange. I'll always have those friends, but I don't have the kind of access and placement to be around them all the time. And finding those people kind of in your next life are super, super challenging. And I'm telling you, I bet 90 plus out of 100 people in your situation might have felt compelled to keep talking, and I would have lost my mind. The fact that you didn't was a big deal.
He doesn't believe it.
We'll tell the story. This story has to be told just more for my personal edification of knowing what it takes to get Nephi.
I actually do want to write about it, so I'm going to save the full story, or we'll do it in another podcast. But no, I didn't do anything. Maybe I did something, but if I did, it was nonverbal communication.
But Nephi picked up on the cue.
I want to talk about mule deer hunting.
Yeah.
So that hunt, we were out in the Bighorn Basin chasing around cow elk with ARs and 308, and I love going on that hunt because of the guys that I go with, and it's just a neat experience. And then,
for sure.
But you recently went on a mule deer hunt, and talk about some tenacity. You decided to use a muzzleloader Rorke?
Yeah. Well, as much as anything, it's proven to be one of the best seasons in Colorado. So, I'm new to this, so I'm still trying to figure out the entire draw system, how you apply for tags, and kind of working your year. The two previous seasons, I'd harvest bulls up in Wyoming with you and good buddies up there in just unbelievably fertile ground and a good spot to do it with a bunch of world-class hunters, which didn't hurt any. My hunting tutelage has been such a cheat compared to most people. My first big game hunt is with Steven Ranella. My next hunts are with you and with John Burns and with these guys that have been doing this their entire lives and in some of the best country on earth to do it in. So that's a little bit of a cheat, and I got to jump to the head of the class right to begin. And it's not like I didn't come into hunting with a set of skill sets that are all there and required to do it. But no, I had failed to harvest anything in Colorado. I'd done archery, and then I like everything. There's people that become zealots, about, any one discipline. I like them all. Long range, short range, archery. I don't think I'll get into spears, but I just like all the different disciplines and what it demands of you. But the muzzleloader, I'd never shot one before. I'd never spent any time with one. And then I just saw, based on the way weather patterns were taking place in Colorado and draw odds in the seasons, that muzzleloader season was just a prime season for when big critters were being active. So I had a tag. A good buddy of mine, Josh, who's a pastor up in my hometown in the mountains of Colorado. He's again avid outdoorsman, great hunter. He and I did the full do-it-yourself public land, go out and compete with everybody else. We were all over this unit trying to find a good spot where we could find a seam. Hunted very, very hard for 4 or 5 days. Certainly people have gone longer and harder, but kind of last morning of the last day, we had elk tags and mule deer tags. I was the only one with a mule deer buck tag, and we were basically done. We were kind of at that point where let's just explore out this one finger of this unit to see really for next year what it looks like. And when we got out on this kind of outcropping, we looked down and out comes this beautiful mule deer that had just felt off its horns. It was just amazing. And then so it was in our unit. It was right on the fringe. Had to run down a hill most people would not consider running down, walk across a river, get back up another hillside to find this thing, and then stalk really close. I was so lacking in confidence in that rifle, not because of the rifle's capacity. I just hadn't shot it enough to really feel good. In Colorado, you got to use loose powder and certain types of rounds, open sights. So you're as primitive as you can go on that rifle, even though they're capable rifles. But I got to within just under 50 yards.
How long did it take you to get within 50 yards?
Probably 3 hours or so.
And this is on public land.
Public land.
And
yeah.
so, you're going in, you're doing a 3-hour stalk on an animal on public land, and there's no telling that somebody else could bust out from another direction and mess this up for you, right?
At any minute, I thought that was going to happen. There were multiple times I thought I was busted by the critter himself, and I was as charged up to do that. And the thing that made this hunt so special is coming from the Stephen Ranella school of hunting and all his friends. Ryan Callahan, who's become a friend, Remy, all those guys who, in my mind, do it right. This was the first time I felt like I got to do like the full meal deal. Like saw this thing in the morning on glass up from a high location, put the thing to bed, worked my tail off to get in a position to where it would hopefully stand up, which it did after hours of sitting dead still in sagebrush, and then got a good shot, and then, cleaned it up ourselves, packed it out ourselves with heavy packs on a Bataan death march through downfall and blow down trees and beetle kill to get this thing out of here. Is just like, by the time I got the truck, I was like, got it. That is what I've been watching. This is, in my mind, what it's about. But like I said, that's not the only hunt. There's so many good ways to go do it, and there's none of them I really look down upon. That I would attribute some of that to our buddy John Burns. I think there was a couple hunts I was almost going to say no to, and he and I got chatting. He's like, "Why would you say no to that? It's just a different experience. At least do it, and then then you might recognize you don't like it, and then don't do it again." And he's totally right. Limiting yourself in general, I think, is bad business. So it's been fun. There's very few hunts I'd say no to. Like I've done a kick and shoot pheasant hunt at like a private place, and I won't do that again. If there's a reunion or some reason to go with good guys, I'd go for the jalapeno poppers, but I wouldn't be enjoying the hunt as much as going after wild birds, because I've done both and there's no comparison between the two for me. And so, it's fun to kind of experience all those different layers of this game and experience and kind of knowing what you like. And I think at this point I'm pretty close to knowing what I like, and I like big country and fair chase and really putting in the work to get there, Yeah.
Yeah, I do too. You're signaling.
I'm telling you how much time we've been on the podcast. That's what, like, when I hold up the one with my finger, that means one. And when I go like this twice, those are zeros.
Yeah. So there's at least one type of hunt that it just doesn't feel like you'll go on these days.
Yeah.
It's a goose hunt.
I've in your mind almost become an anti-goose hunter. Yeah,
is there something about geese that you just really love?
No, I'm taking it personal.
Yeah, you should.
Did you feed them? Did you feed them at Bud's?
No,
you guys
I don't feel good about it. I hate having said no multiple times to the same hunt, but I think I said over lunch that we will not let this next season close without getting it done.
Yeah.
We thought maybe it was the water thing. Like they really like the water. You like the water.
Yeah. No.
But you shoot ducks, so that can't be it.
I have no affinity for goose in some way that I'm trying to keep them safe. I'm all about it. Yeah.
All right. I assumed it was a personal affront.
Yeah.
Nothing about goose. I'm happy to go as long as you're not there.
No, not at all. Not at all. It's a new one in the quiver because I haven't done it before. So trust me, I want to stack it up.
And I pretty much hunt anything if I'm going to eat it. And the one thing about goose that I'll say is big game. Elk is my absolute, like, my number one.
He's been holding out. I'm going to tell you in a second. He's been holding out.
So elk's like my number one. But there's something about a goose.
Yeah.
Like when you can hit it with a flag a half a mile away and get them all to turn and come to you into your decoy pattern. And then when they cup up so hard that their wings are practically touching and they drop in and you could reach up and grab, or they drop their legs and you could reach up and grab them by their feet and pull them into the pit.
Over.
Right. As they're dropping in, there's just, it's a pretty cool experience.
No, cool. There's so much excitement across all those things. I've had very few experiences where there wasn't something so redeeming and unique about each hunt. I did a duck hunt this fall. I've got a good buddy that's a real senior guy at Ducks Unlimited that's kind of offered up this unbelievable duck hunting camp that he's cultivated over years. He's been very successful, so it's a spectacular camp in Arkansas, but he kind of wants me to bring veterans every year, so I do. I bring teammates and veterans out there to hunt every year, and this year there weren't as many ducks in the sky, but we went out rabbit hunting with a bunch of these, little beagles running through the thickets and hearing those dogs work and go crazy. And then the anticipation of, those rabbits will run loops, right? So the dogs take off and you think you're supposed to chase them and you got to stay because that rabbit's going to run a loop back to kind of where it started. And just the anticipation of these things coming out of these thickets and having, a hundredth of a second to get a shot off with a shotgun to get them. It's just like, I can't think of something much more fun. And then the next day we're out in the blind going after ducks, and I was like, I can't think of something much more fun. And it, so it's just the best thing is I think people put limits on. I only want to do this. I'm like, man, you're crazy. There's so much fun. There's so much fun to be in that world.
No experience is the same.
Yeah, no experience is the same. Exactly right. Yeah, and I tell this to people too, particularly young people, that the thing that's fun about having done the jobs I've done, and then particularly in the SEAL teams, is I have probably forgotten more cool stories than most people will stack up. Now hunters fall resolutely in the same category because it's just every single trip you're not going to have at least one, usually multiple good stories of folly or idiocy or just elation and excitement that takes place, or disaster. That's what happens on hunts, and that's what makes it good. Is you just start stacking up these stories. And I feel like, if you had nothing to say at the coffee table or dinner table, you're not doing enough to find those stories.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, that's why people write books.
For sure.
About their hunting experiences, right? You had something you were going to say before, Nephi.
I was going to give you a hard time about holding out. Dave apparently has found urban hunting to be quite entertaining, and he's been shooting Eurasian doves with an air gun, and I had no idea that this is an undiscovered country for me. Now I have to get an air gun.
Hang on. So you got half of the story right. You got half of the
Which
story.
Which did I mess up?
The air gun part.
Oh no.
I don't shoot Eurasian collared doves with an air gun. I shoot them with a 12 gauge.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's less fun now.
No,
I thought maybe you were just like taking them off the road outside your house, like in the middle of the neighborhood.
It was
a little funner that way.
We'll talk about that. We'll talk about what I do for that offline. It's not an air gun. But Eurasian collared doves, I don't know if you've ever hunted those.
No.
So I grew up hunting mourning doves. That's the first thing I ever hunted.
Yeah.
A lot of kids cut their teeth on doves. And so that's what I cut my teeth on, hunting mourning doves with a 410, right? And then now we've had in the past 15 years or so, these Eurasian collared doves were introduced, I think unintentionally, down in in Florida, actually in the Caribbean, got into Florida, and they've really spread from there across the entire country. And there are places now where I go, and I know the research isn't there yet, and sometimes anecdotal evidence isn't until you can confirm it through the scientific method. It's hard to put any stock in it, but I can tell you just anecdotally that places that I've gone that 15 years ago I'd go and I'd kill 10, 15 mourning doves. I'll go and I'll kill one, and I'll kill 30 collared doves. So collared doves are coming in and they're displacing in a lot of places mourning doves.
Yeah.
At least that's what I've seen. In Wyoming, in a lot of states. Some states are different, but in Wyoming in particular, there's no season, there's no limit, there's no caliber requirement, there's no no restriction on method of take for these Eurasian collared doves. So sometimes, I'll dove hunt in the fall, but sometimes, June will roll around and I'm like, I just get the hankering, right? And I'll go out and I'll shoot 40 or 50 collared doves.
Oh, it's a gift, yeah.
And they kept us in the closet.
And I keep them all. I mean, I breast them out.
Sure.
I eat them. They taste great. You get twice as much meat as you would off of mourning dove. I kind of call collared doves are the B-52 of doves because they just kind of come in. They don't. Doves. Mourning doves are zipping all over the place. It's hard to shoot. Collared doves are like just smaller than a pigeon.
Right on.
But they're pretty good. So So
we'll compare notes later.
He says I'm holding out on him. But my last, I have two more questions for you before we finish this up.
Yep.
First question. What's next for Rorke Denver? So you're building your brand. What's next?
Yeah, I mean, again, I told you the 5-year plan is hard for me to ever kind of pick out. The base of my pyramid is still kind of the big keynote speech at, company's big sales meeting or a small executive team. I did this kind of program last year. I called my campfire session. So I did 4, kind of almost like a online video podcast, but I'd sit around a campfire because I think campfires are just special. No outdoorsman, cannot, certify that fact. And so people could come around and actually be at the campfire, and I'd tell some stories. I'd have some leadership or kind of life lesson that kind of came out of that, and then we'd just do a bunch of question and answer because I was getting enough feedback on social media and some of those platforms that, God, I'm never going to probably see one of your big stage events. Would love to have access to talk, and so that's why we created that. I think this year I'm starting to book private campfire sessions. So I've had a couple executive teams. I had one family reunion book me to come out and do a campfire where we tell stories and do question and answer and just have a good time together. So, that's one thing that's grown. I think the experience stuff is a lot of fun. So doing something where people can come to a location and get uncomfortable, maybe do some shooting, maybe do some suffering and do some sessions that'll, I think, create some of those growth opportunities, particularly folks that don't do what we do, which is seek that out, multiple times throughout the year in tough country. So I've got a couple of those events spinning up this summer. I'm definitely going to write more. I haven't pinpointed the next project and what that looks like. But yeah, again, if you go to my website, therorkedenver.com, I'm posting spots and offerings there. So if people want to find me and want to jump in, that's how to engage. And then we'll see. There's always seem to be some entertainment opportunities that are kind of circling. I'm very, very guarded about what I say yes to and no to. It's got to have a purpose and the ethos behind it that I think is of value. I won't just do it to do it. But there's a couple projects that are interesting. So we'll see if those come to fruition. Great. If they don't, no problem. I don't need to be on TV or in the public space just to be there. If I feel like I can move the needle and do a good thing with it, I'll do a good thing with it. And then, there's a couple other small projects that I'm developing and building, and when they're ready, I'll release them.
Yeah, you did a TV show on Fox, right?
I did, yeah. American Grit.
It really hurt me to watch your people not be able to.
Big John Cena.
It really hurt me when your team got lost in the woods.
It was tough. It was tough. You think it hurt you? I was standing there losing my mind a couple of times. The funniest one. There's an episode where even John, Big John Cena from WWE fame and now Hollywood fame, has become a good friend. Absolutely phenomenal human being. One of the most genuine, global superstars you're ever going to be around, but just a phenomenal human being. Anyway, at one point, he saw how upset I was about a decision my team made. We basically had a relay race where they would go out and they didn't really know what they were going to find, right? So you could take the hard path and you'd get a big advantage, or you could take an easy path and you'd get no advantage, and then that would happen 3 times. So just on basic game theory, I felt like I had a very good sense on when you should take risk and not take risk. So I knew for at least 2 rounds we were going to go the hard route. So sure enough, they go the hard route and they're basically tied and got a big advantage. Then they head out against the 3 other teams. There's 4 teams competing, and they go on round 2. And then I see a team coming back that had clearly gone the hard route, and then I see my team chugging in with a different kind of advantage. And so I knew they'd taken the easy path, and I honestly almost lost my mind. I mean, I almost had a meltdown on national television. And John even commented, he's like, I literally am looking at Commander Denver right now, and it looks like I'm looking at my dad when I took the car out for a joyride and shouldn't have done it. I mean, it was, I had nothing for him. I honestly, I just let them, I was like, do what you want to do. Go ahead. Do it on your own.
You remember that time I didn't talk?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was watching it too. I was like, yep, that's it. Those people should just shut up.
It was the opposite.
They should not say anything right now, or somebody.
No, I will say that team that I led, they did take the hard path all the way through. They spent more time in the elimination challenges than any other team, and I almost delivered as big a team as the team that had spent the less time to the finale. And then my real superstar in the team just had a mental lapse, and I blame myself as much as I blame him. And the last challenge before we went to the finals just had a mental error that cost him the game. I think he could have won the whole thing. It was crushing, but it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun doing it. And like I said, it was helping people perform at a high level and hopefully pushing them a new place. And I ended up with my two female athletes are the ones that made the final, and one of them, both of them are fantastic. But this one gal, Goldie, is just this small African American gal that I think had never had anybody really believe in her. And it's even on some of the camera. And she's just like, look, I don't think I've ever had anybody believe in me before. And it was just a game changer. It was just so cool to be around. Very, very cool.
Yeah, we told somebody who was watching that, I was like, you want to know something about Rorke? I said, and you're a motivational dude. And I said, if that dude is we were watching it, it's like, yeah, we were looking at your teams, that guy tells you, you're going to, there's a giant, there's a hill, there's a whole bunch of angry people up at that hill. It's just you and me. We're going to go up that hill. We're going to beat all those people. You'd be like, hell yeah, we are.
It was fun, man. She actually eliminated one of the biggest kind of physical threats in the very first elimination challenge. He was just kind of an obnoxious person, and was clearly cast for the reality show for that kind of personality trait. But he was, I think, really hugely narcissistic and believed he was going to win the whole thing, and she sent him packing on the first night. I called my dad after that, and I was like, I'm telling you, if nothing good else happens this entire season of this show, it was worth being here to see that. Yeah, it was cool. It was cool.
Good stuff.
Yep. Sorry, what was the other one? Yeah.
So here's the second question. This is going to cause you to pivot off of this a little bit.
Sounds good.
But we like to end this show a particular way every time, right? And so people come on so this is Your Mountain Podcast. We're talking about all these, usually we're talking about all these places that are these outdoor places.
Yeah.
They don't necessarily have to be outdoor places. It's just, important places, to us individually.
Yeah. And metaphorically or
in reality.
Yeah.
There are these places that, trigger certain memories, experiences, whatever. They're just, they help define you as a person. It's what is this place for you? And so we ask everybody that question that comes on here. We say, what is your mountain? What's that place for you?
It's good. I should have. I don't like preparing, so. I prepare for things I need to prepare for, but I like these conversations because they're not canned and prepared. I don't know why it made me think of it, but I will say I've been in a lot of beautiful country. I think if you never left the shores of this great country, you would be missing almost nothing. I mean, that we have it all. Everything that you want to see, immerse yourself in. We enjoy here on this unbelievable piece of real estate. I recommend world travel, but you wouldn't need to see it all. I do remember a combat mission over in Iraq in the summer of 2006. We were out in Al Anbar province, western provinces of the Sunni Triangle, where the worst of the fighting was taking place in that era of that battle. And we were kind of in between Fallujah and Ramadi. We're on the Euphrates River. So this, just one of the kind of legendary rivers in that region of the world. And I remember we got in a gunfight. A sniper had tried to kill a bunch of us, but it had almost succeeded with one of my lead drivers. Got very, very lucky. He took some frag, but he didn't actually get hit by one of the rounds. If inches away from this guy taking his life. But anyway, we were able to deal with that situation, but we're still in enough of a fight and in bad country that we had to be careful. But we kind of were in a what I would call a little bit of a holding pattern where we couldn't move based on other units that were moving around the area, and we knew bad guys were in certain spots. We basically just had to hold in our position with our gun trucks and kind of an external security force where my guys were all spread around. Snipers were on corners so they could engage the enemy. I had heavy weapons guys and trucks in positions where they could return fire. Somehow I kind of found myself alone. And by that I mean 15 feet away from somebody else and on the other side of a palm tree overlooking the Euphrates River. But I was faced in a direction where I was watching the sunset. And so I was watching the sunset over this palm grove overlooking the Euphrates River, where Alexander and his Macedonians had walked through there and into Afghanistan, all these unbelievable places, and I knew fighting had been taking place there, and I was finally in full engaged combat, which I wanted to do as an officer in the military. And I honestly can't remember anything more beautiful than just seeing that sunset, knowing that it was setting in the west and kind of in the direction of home and why I was there and what I wanted to go back to. And that, while it wasn't particularly on the mountain, although I guess that was high ground in that region, it was just this magical moment. So as opposed to giving you some big metaphorical answer on the mountain I'm climbing in my life or something like that, something about that was a beautiful, beautiful spot to be, and that's what it makes me think of when you ask me that.
Appreciate you sharing.
Boom.
Really do.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty about that question is it's different for everybody.
Yeah.
Yet somehow so many people can relate.
Yeah. Very cool.
To everybody's personal, very personal, unique experiences and places.
Yeah.
So thank you for doing that. And
You're welcome.
And thanks for coming on this podcast. It's
delighted.
Great to finally be able to do this.
For sure.
Great to see you again.
Yep.
Hope we get to see you again soon. Hopefully we can actually get something on the calendar.
Yeah, man.
Really do appreciate it. Nephi, anything else you wanted to add?
I'm good.
Right on, man. I appreciate it, gents. No. Thanks for having me. It's a treat. Good conversation. I love these things. I just think this medium is just one of the best ways to.
Don't start podcasting.
No, I'm not. I'm not planning to. It's just good.
The
it's
last
just good
thing
stuff.
we need is competition from people who are better at it than us.
No, it's a great forum. I love the dialogue and appreciate both of you, and we'll do it again.
Yeah, we have that recorded. I appreciate that you put that on the record. No, that's great. Thanks so much for being here. And hey, everybody out there listening, remember that life is about experiences, so go have one.